Cakes that you can't distinguish
Yes.
from like,
Oh my gosh. Where they're like,
I could cut this right now and it could be a cake and you just don't
Isn't
know.
that a Netflix show?
It is.
Yeah.
Have you seen the video where the guy, he's watching the videos of people like cutting a shampoo bottle's cake, and he looks shocked, and then he like grabs his phone and squeezes it, and it's cake. And he freaks out, and then he like grabs his TV remote and squeezes it, and it's cake, and he starts panicking, and then he looks down at his butt and he grabs his butt and it's cake. He's like, ah! That was everything is cake.
Why do they highlight chefs? What's up with this?
I think there's on something there that
as
and I think it
resources,
wasn't John Perkins, it was somebody else that
as you run out of resources, the ability to turn the remaining few resources into actual edible food becomes very valuable. So while the rich will prefer in an empire in collapse, this comes from my experience of Nazi Germany a couple of lifetimes ago. While the rich will prefer their celebrity cooks to be posh, the reality of why cooks will be valued is because resources will be running out. And the ones who can turn grass into steak will be valuable.
that was saying like there's this feeling in whether it's a nation or an empire that like times were great, we were great, but no one's feeling it anymore. Like there's another one, mercenaries. When you have to start fighting, hiring mercenaries for fighting your wars for you, like the God and country isn't working anymore. Then, and same thing with the bread and circuses. I think it's part of the whole chef thing is part of the bread and circuses thing.
did you see that they're having serious problems recruiting people for the military? They've lowered the education standard. They've lowered the fitness standard. We're going to have wars fought by mercenaries in no time.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. Actually, what's interesting, military from 2000 to 2006, and everyone that when I got basically to my unit, everyone was saying like, yeah, you kind of went through the piece of cake boot camp where they can't touch you, they can't hit you, they can't push you, and like you didn't need to do even half as much of the running as we needed to. So even back then, about 20 years ago, apparently.
Dragon Adventure, baby! Come get it!
It was like a shell of what it used to be, boot camp.
We had Blackwater fighting a huge part, or at least if not fighting the war in the Middle East, they were like functioning as administration for a lot of them. I mean, that's mercenary.
Mm-hmm. Well, look at Ukraine. American citizens are on the ground in Ukraine, but the U.S. is like, we didn't send them there.
Right.
They're not officially ours, and it's like an international cohort of individuals fighting this war.
But so you said countries got 250 years, but what about like France, which had 900,000 years?
Well, it's empires. It's not countries. It's empires. So, like, other
France
empires are still around. Other like Great
Turkey
Britain
exists.
still around.
But has the U.S. been an empire for 250 years? It hasn't.
Well, not an empire, and that's a good point because 17. I don't know when they start the clock either.
Right.
When you are officially an empire, because I know 1776. I guess you wouldn't have called the United States an empire.
It wasn't until I think like the 1900s that the U.S. went totally empirical. I mean,
Yeah,
Federal Reserve.
46 even.
Who was that guy that everybody hates? Woodrow Wilson.
Oh man, yeah.
Everybody hates that guy, right?
It was like after World War II, they realized if we don't become a world order empire, whatever, that we're gonna have World War III. So they were like liberal economic order, which you could call an empire. We got military bases all over the earth. Sign of
The
an
liberal
empire.
international economy.
Yes,
Yeah,
the lie.
I like that.
The lie was established in 1946.
It's also this is a different world than all the other empires when we were like mapping out this 250-year lifespan as well. When you're talking about nations and empires, you're also talking about like major economic blocks, like transnational economic blocks.
I also want to point out, isn't it that empires last 250 years on average?
Is it?
Well, I mean, the Soviet Union lasted 69 years.
Yeah.
And that was massive. I mean, they were spreading all over the planet. Remnants still exist in some fashion today. The U.S., I mean, I wonder if the 250 years thing is based upon the extent of communications without electronics, right? So all of these big empires communicated through letter delivery, carrier, horseback. Now we have rapid communication. That causes things to evolve much more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now with the internet and social media, it's just
I think it's because eventually, as you become the global power, you are no longer the most innovative power. And eventually, somebody will innovate a way to make you obsolete. And then you are no longer an empire. You will still be a powerful country, but your unquestioned rule over the planet will cease because somebody will just make an invention that makes you irrelevant, obsolete. Then you will compete with them. You may or may not win and regain your empire, but most likely, based on history, you won't win against the rising empire. Like the British didn't win against the Americans during the Revolutionary War. You can resist a new rising global superpower, but there's very little you can actually do.
ramping up faster than. So I mean, you think about Franz Ferdinand, right? He gets shot. How long did it take for everyone to find out? Probably not that long, relative to now, but it was lightning speed relative to previous conflicts. Telegraph, radio, word went out to their countries really quickly, but how long did it take for regular people to find out? You know, if we had something like that happen today, it'd be on social media the moment it happened. Everyone would see it, so it's even faster. That anger, that animosity, the conflict can spread instantly across every person. So you think about the conflicts we've had in this country. Sentiment for civil war, right, in the United States. How long did it take for an idea to go from one person to everyone in a city, to make it from New York to, Illinois, or to, down to Florida, like those ideas to change and then create rifts? Probably took a really, really long time.
Well, you look at like the first Persian Empire, and one of the biggest reasons they collapsed internally was because of all of these internal rifts they were having, rebellions. They were taking slaves and bringing them into their military and making them mercenaries, as we were talking about. And now, because of technology, like you're saying, we're having this ramping up of that kind of stuff, rebellions like Black Lives Matter internally, causing rebellion within the U.S. All of these, and then we also have information that shows us that you have Russia, China potentially pumping money into these internal rebellions that we're facing in the West. And you're right, we're going to have basically a repeat of what caused a lot of these past empires to collapse on crack because of the technological. Yeah,
It's the waiting I can't stand.
Yeah, just bring it on.
Like 20, Ian's talking about a guy in the woods, like cracking open an old can of tuna and putting carrots in it, and I'm like, sounds pretty good.
I can't wait.
I wonder if this is actually an American empire or if it's just the British Empire amassed with the American military. Because
That's
British
part of
Empire
it.
is actually an empire.
Is it actually
That's part
an
of it.
American
There's also,
empire
like, a
or is
math
it the
equation. This one guy,
Anglo-American
it was an old
empire?
TED Talks, but he was saying, like, even in a bacterial petri dish, mismatches between resources and consumption cause things like 5 generations before the decline. It's the population is doubling every single generation, and then 5 generations before the decline, the food declines by 15/16. The next generation by 3/4, and it's empty in the next generation, or in the next generation is about half, and then the following generation is the mathematical conclusion of it. I don't know if that petri dish is a one-on-one parallel to what we're dealing with, but
Well, so you've heard that wealth lasts 3 generations, they say, right? The first generation is, comes up, figures it out, works hard, and then has that within them, this individual. They have kids. Those kids learn a lesson from the first generation. They inherit the wealth, and they know a little bit enough to kind of just sort of maintain it. Now you have another generation, and they're learning a lesson about a lesson. It's a copy of a copy. And so by the third generation, they have no idea how the empire was built. They have no idea how to start a company. They don't have the same life lessons. So I have to think about this too. I hear stories about people who they're like, I was a college dropout and I was poor and I worked hard, and now they have kids, and those kids are children of the wealthiest people on the planet. They're not going to learn the same lesson. Like Steve Jobs was homeless. He was like sleeping on couches and floors. And then he had that fire within him and ruthlessness, let's be real. His kids, I don't know, I'm assuming he has kids, but like the children of these people don't have that. They grew up in luxury.
totally.
I know it's like such a tired analogy, the good men, bad times thing, but they've got another Arab parable that's like just like what you're talking about, where it's like,
I still think that the model offered in terms of education and life experience for the young, where entering into apprentice work positions is preferable to hard education. Being the apprentice and apprenticing under many different masters is most likely the way to go forward in education. So, education needs an absolutely radical reform, but I do not have a path forward. So, from that point of view, the only thing I can say is that we need to keep exploring on what will eventually generate the combination of education factors to create a good form of education. There are some ideas, but none of them are at the moment good enough. So perhaps the next attempt could be basic education after kindergarten. Kindergarten is just for the fun times. Basic education afterwards. Basic education consists of reading, writing, arithmetic, and very basic actions like that. Then apprenticeship, and you get paid very little, but you do get paid for your apprenticeship. And then you are expected to get like 3 or 4 year long apprentice programs, or 1 3 year long, or whatever, just a couple of apprentice programs. Then the citizen service, where the state takes you in between 18 and something like 26 or 28 or something. They teach you everything that schools really can't teach you safely. Like in a normal school, taking all the kids to camping in like Utah or whatever would be a little harsh, but 18 to 26-year-olds, that's okay. Teaching everybody a driver's license for free, giving everybody all the first aid education things, teaching you how to pay your taxes, the basic stuff that schools aren't educated to do, and the apprenticeship system isn't designed for. The worker isn't designed to go to, like, everybody can't go to first aid school during apprenticeship. But if everybody knows professional levels of first aid, then life expectancy in a society will radically rise. Everybody will know when somebody's having a stroke, what to do, and so on and so forth. I keep hearing these stories of situations where I know that I could tell that somebody was having a stroke and call an ambulance, and these people just don't call ambulances. They don't know what to do. That is because they don't have the first aid education. They don't know when it is actually serious. So then the military service or citizen service could be as short as 3 to 6 months. Then after that, everybody is asked if they prefer to return to the private sector and consider themselves graduated from the school system, or would they prefer to work for the government? And if they do, would they prefer armed or unarmed service? Not combat or non-combat service, but armed or unarmed service. And both in a time of crisis will result in combat because the state will be attacked in a time of crisis. But unarmed will be of the policy that if the enemy comes to you and there's nobody armed around you, you will surrender. And armed means that if they come for you and you are unarmed, you will attempt to punch them. And then we just simply assign them to government work. work. The military people are told that they can quit any 2 or 3 years. So there's like a period of time when you cannot quit when you are considered to be on service. Then every few years they will bring you the do you want to quit now papers. And with the if you don't quit now option, they will give you things like if you do not quit now, when this is the end of your 2 years of service, when your period is up, you will be promoted 3 ranks, get 300 more a month, and you will be given 3 more vacation days a month, and so on and so forth. So everybody will be told that if they do sign for government work and take the military path, if they are not absolute, complete, and monstrous fuck ups, by the end they'll be a colonel. Like a guarantee that if you serve normally, not even spectacularly well, but just normally, you will be not a general by the end. That requires like actual shown competency in combat, but you will be very high up the CO ladder if you just stay and do your job and nothing else. And for the non-combat roles, they would be by the government found work. They would not be expected to do their own work finding. The government would assign them. They would say, my preference is this, and the government would tell you, show up there at this and this time, you're hired. And then if you go to private sector, you will be given a certificate that you worked at those places for your education, and you will be given a final diploma and all that. You will also be given it if you choose to continue, but it will be added to consistently as you work. And the point of the whole education, once you get beyond like 3rd degree, is to make you a good curriculum vitae, to make you a document during that entire education. The whole purpose will be to make you a document that just by showing to somebody at the kind of job you want, they'll hire you. And the school's job is to, I wouldn't use the word forge because it's an actual facility dedicated to proving that, but to make sure that even if the school collapses, vanishes from the world, the document itself will prove that you are able to do it. And speaking as somebody who has a lot of these education diplomas, currently they're worth dick. They're worth dick. You can assign them to your work certificate or whatever, and it will be a minuscule benefit. What I am actually talking about is a completed portfolio in your field of study with proven good works and proven ability to conduct yourself in your field as a single piece of paper. It could be a 10-page file that proves your best attributes. It could be 3 pictures of on a pipe somewhere. It would be something that by its very presence, if the school itself, which they usually go like, Harvard collapsed, so I don't value your papers. If the school itself vanishes, you'll still get a job in your field just by showing that paper. To get to that point, education needs a dramatic revaluation, because right now it's baby park. It's where you put the annoying kids so that the adults can work. That's its function. We need it to be geared to actually give you value. And to do that, we need to completely rework the work market. And the only thing that I can see to be a solution to that is a government guaranteed workplace, which I go about by doing the military reform. You can at any point during your life go to either the government or the military and just say, I want a job, and they're obligated to hire you.
I'll ride a camel. My son will ride in a Toyota. His son will ride in a Ferrari, and then his son will ride a camel. And there's a reason that these parables exist, though. The good men, hard times, whatever. It's because it's just what happens every damn time. And humanity keeps trying to tell us we've lived this story a billion times. But all right, guys, good luck. Do it again. Have fun.
That's why I'm saying, like, when I have kids, like, I'm gonna kick them out at 3 years old and be like, here's a bandana, a trowel, a pack of seeds, and a pointy stick.
Like maybe a match.
But in all seriousness, what we do is we take the newborn, we put him in the woods for a day, and if he survives, he's strong enough to join the tribe. I think
That's some
that was
George Carlin
No,
logic.
that was the Spartans. I think they did that, right? If the baby didn't survive, like out in the wilderness, it wasn't strong enough. And then, nothing crazy like that. But I certainly think you gotta teach. I mean, like hard labor, like good manual labor, chores, lifting stuff, shoveling, mowing the lawn. You gotta teach kids, those kind of lessons. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast.
Indeed. Blank temperature. It's pretty hot. What if you took the wavelength of light, which when you have more energy in light becomes shorter, not longer. So if you take the shortest possible distance in the universe and make that the wavelength of light, what is the temperature you get? And that is, if I think it might be correct, but I'm unsure, is the Planck temperature. If you take the highest possible heat into the lowest possible space, what will happen? You get Planck temperature. Black holes could theoretically be called Planck stars. I'm still curious if the surface of a black hole is solid or if it is actually a point of light in the middle. Because the more I think about black holes, I get the image that the surface is solid, that it's actually just a sphere, that it's just a round sphere. Infinitely tight, but still just a round sphere. I believe that could be solved if we could make a black hole in a box and do different kinds of light reflection tests on it. So I think with enough advancement in astrophysics, we will be able to determine this one out. I like my theory about the end of the universe, though. I prefer it. It is not complete, though. I notice a few errors in it. The theory is that when matter becomes super cool, it exists in many places at the same time. And then when it receives heat again, or energy interacting with it, it collapses into just one place, but exists as a cloud in many positions when it becomes cool enough. It's called a superposition or Bose-Einstein condensate. It literally, if you take a picture of a supercooled object, you will see many objects. So if you take a chair, for example, and freeze it to something like a googol of a percentage point of absolute zero, you'll see many chairs. And then if you take one chair and start pulling it away, the other chairs start to vanish and you'll just have one chair because the act of moving it takes energy into the system. So once the universe begins at the end of it to expand faster and faster, it will also become cooler and cooler. and you will have a single Bose-Einstein condensate at the middle once all the matter has expanded outside of the light cone of the universe or the interaction field of the universe or what have you. And that Bose-Einstein condensate will become cooler and more reactive if it touches anything hot as time goes by. So if our current universe, the energy shell at the exterior of the universe touches a grain of sand, we will hardly notice it. But if that Bose-Einstein condensate so much as touches an electron, it will collapse into a single atom again, and that atom will be the size of trillions of light years across, and that will be the Big Bang. So that will be what happens. I think the main problem is that if it touches another matter, it might become a part of that matter, but that doesn't really change the outcome. Either way, you float as a Bose-Einstein condensate for an infinitely long amount of time. Becoming so cool that memories are indistinguishable from reality, and you will be playing with your memories as if they were real. Then eventually something will hit you and you will become aware of it, and you will have something that is actually new and not something that can only be accessed through memory. And then your interaction to that will define what you are in that new universe. I have a theory that cold source destroyers me. As soon as I got cold source, my steam started to decay really fast. Like within 3 years, I got like 10 cavities. So I think it changes something like the bacterial composition on the muck of the teeth or the saliva production or something similar, which causes the holes. So this is the most important scientific tool of our era. And can be on blank. This one. Most important scientific tool, more important than CERN.
Everybody out there, YouTube land, this is Jake Jabarilli of Jabarilli.com. Just a bunch of referrals.
And I know what I said. More important than any of your scientific tests that I have ever come across. Anything, anywhere.
Thing, and I'm going to go through it today, hopefully just covering the necessary parts of it. Again, here I am in OpenSDF. If you've seen my channel, you've probably seen this before, but if you don't know what this is, it's a way to see multiple mobile devices simultaneously. I have one of them up right here, and I'm running the Boink client, and in particular for the Moo Wrapper. It's a really funny name, but I just wanted to go through this with you guys so you could get an idea of what I'm doing and how you can do it for yourself. So you want to go to Android, and I'll have it in my in the link below as well as in my website. Download Boink, pretty easy to do. It's a tiny little file. Then you want to go into the Add Project section and grab the Moo exclamation point. It's not going to be here now since I already have it on, but any one of these other ones you can grab. Depending upon the phone, you may not get all of this list. It may be a smaller list. The more powerful the phone, the more likely you get everything. The less powerful the phone, the less likely to get everything. And some of these projects aren't active right now, so you could download them and you'll never get any work. But anyways, you go and pick on, then you put the check mark on, you continue, then you either create an account or log into a previous account. All they need is an email address, your name, it could be anything, and a password. No, not even a confirmation of a password. Just stick in a password. Make sure you remember it though. And of course, if you're going to do multiple projects, just use the same password. It's not that important. Who else is going to do work for you, right? It's like putting out your crypto address and people going, "Oh, you put out your address? Yeah, you can use that address and send me money if you like." So, if you want to log into my account and send me more credits, it's fine by me. Anyways, some notifications. There's a notifications for what's going on here. I've got a lot of devices running on the Move Wrapper right now, so they're letting me know things that are going on. This is the project I'm working on.
Move Wrapper. So maybe this one. If we cut heat in all apartment buildings and government buildings by 10%, reduce the cost of electricity so that you can run computer programs.
You need Terra, an all-in-one remote monitoring and management solution to run your entire.
Find
Hey guys, there's a pretty good chance that at least
that is underpowered or underutilized actually, and install Boink on them, the heat generation will be the same. In fact, in many government offices, it would be much more viable to just run Boink on the background in the computers to generate heat than to have heating systems. I've seen how many computers these guys have. In many ways, it would be more efficient.
part of the day, your computer is sitting there not being used or it's not doing anything. So in this video, I want to show you how to use Boink to basically let your computer help scientists solve problems. So according to the Berkeley University website, Boink lets you help cutting-edge science research using your computer or Android device. Boink downloads scientific computing jobs to your computer and runs them invisibly in the background. It's easy and safe, and about 30 science projects use Boink. So in this video, I'll show you how to set up Boink on your home media server. You don't really need Open Media Vault for this. You can do this with just Docker and Portainer the way I'm doing it. But in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up Boink and actually contribute some of your unused compute cycles on your computer to help scientists solve problems. Okay, guys, so in order to install Boink,
Berkeley Open Infrastructure Network Computing. There are some things which we can very well calculate with computers, but we cannot find the power to do all of the calculations yet. And were we to calculate them, there are certain benefits which go far beyond computer sciences, far beyond, that are worth noting. One of those things is protein folding, which is how your cells turn the inanimate matter into something that reacts with your cells. Now, we know some of these proteins. You see them when you see like this medicine affects this and this particular group. But we do not even know every protein that your body produces on a normal day. Not to even mention all the proteins if your body decides to crap out somehow and what can be produced. Once we know all those, we will have a much better biological healthcare system. And there are similar problems. Some of them, when people talk of Boink, they tend to be scientists, so they start talking about information sciences. But there are actual beneficial real-world things we could do with Boink. One of those is to find every possible protein combination your body can produce and their most likely reactions in your body. And then once we have that, we can see if, for example, you feel puffy if you have a protein that we can determine is the cause. If you have cancer and we know the proteins very distinctly, we can just check which of them is behind your cancer. It's very revolutionary if we go through all of them, but unfortunately, there are literally trillions of combinations. So going through them by hand is impossible. We need massive computational power, and Boink offers us one of the only realistic ways to do this. My personal favorite project that is on Boink is SETI at Home, which I believe most people have heard about. It has as as much as the guys who made it said in the beginning, not found any aliens, but it has found a lot of very interesting solar phenomena, or rather stellar phenomena, like different types of radio stars and such.
So then they took a vote. No, wait. Say that again. They took a vote? I don't believe you. They took a vote, but that has never ever happened before. Never ever. Wow. Yep. Okay. Bye. July 30th, 1943. This week, a major political development hits the headlines and shocks the world. This week, Benito Mussolini falls from power. And now, a word from our sponsors. More paste, smoother on the throat. Axis continued its advances, and new Soviet offensives in the Donbass did as well. A Japanese counterattack on New Georgia failed, and the Allied invasion of Sicily continued its advances across the island. U.S. 7th Army's Provisional Corps is mopping up the west of the island after the capture of Palermo last week, and 2nd Corps has cut the northern coast road and will now turn east. They are under Allied Army Group Commander Harold Alexander's orders to head for Messina along two axes. As for Bernard Montgomery's British 8th Army, most of this week he's just gathering his forces for an attack to begin next week. Adrano is the next objective, since taking this would split the enemy forces to either side of Mount Etna. The Canadians on his left are still moving this week, though, and by the 29th, they've reached Agria on Route 121, and that's under 30 kilometers west of Adrano. The British 78th Division also takes Catena Nuova the night of the 29th. Really, they're all just gearing up for next week. Also on the 29th, Luftwaffe boss Smiling Albert Kesselring tells Adolf Hitler that the likely outcome of all of this seems like it will be an Axis evacuation from Messina. He tells him he could do it in 3 days. But let me back up a few days, because the overall Italian situation has changed dramatically. On July 24th, and long into the night, the members of Italy's fascist Grand Council meet. See, with the invasion of Sicily, the bombing of Rome last week, and Mussolini's failure to speak up about getting Italy out of the war when meeting with Hitler last week, there are those who wish to remove Mussolini from power. Mussolini is aware of this. He begins the meeting with a talk about Comando Supremo and then a summary of the recent war. Dino Grandi, who lost his post as Minister of Grace and Justice in February for his loud and increasing criticism of the war, then presents his order of the day to the council. This calls for the restoration of pre-fascist institutions and for the king to assume supreme military and civil power. This would basically be the end of not only Mussolini's rule, but also fascism and participation in the war. Well, Grandi also presents a pretty scathing speech. He then calls for a vote on the order. If you think that sounds strange, then you're right. This is the first time the Fascist Grand Council has ever voted on anything. They are anti-parliamentary. At 2 a.m., the order passes 19 to 8, and Benito Mussolini is out of his job after after nearly 21 years at the helm. Well, to summarize what happens next, the king gets the news and also decides to have Mussolini arrested. This happens at 5 p.m. the 25th. Marshal Pietro Badoglio is called upon to create a new government. The reaction on the streets of Rome was an exuberant outpouring of gratitude to the king, owing to the assumption that Italy would finally be free of this unpopular war. Unfortunately, neither the king nor Comando Supremo had made any firm decisions about how best to extricate Italy from the Berlin-Rome alliance. Interestingly enough, on the 25th, before learning of this, Hitler already decides to send 8 army divisions and 3 Waffen-SS divisions to Italy. Hitler and German command are then taken by surprise by the events of the day. But they understand a Badoglio government may well portend an imminent Italian defection from the war, which would threaten the Wehrmacht in southern Europe. German units will soon cross the Alpine passes and occupy southern Tyrol. They will cross in the Piedmont and the Julian Alps. A variety of plans are also suddenly really in the works to occupy Italy and the Balkans, to free Mussolini, to capture the Italian fleet, a bunch of stuff. In Italy, after a day of Italian celebrations, a curfew is called, and on the 27th, Badoglio's Council of Ministers meet. They decide to move Mussolini to an island to dissolve the fascist party. The immediate tactical outcome of the coup was a weakening of Hitler's resolve to hold Sicily in favor of reinforcing Wehrmacht strength in metropolitan Italy to deal with future contingencies. Well, as I said, Kesselring is thinking about evacuation, and he is not planning on repeating the Tunisian debacle. As for the Allied reaction, the combined chiefs of staff haven't really made any concrete plans for what to do after Sicily because they didn't know whether the Italians would fight or not. Since they haven't fought that well, and with Mussolini out, they figure resistance will lessen in general, so they activate plans to attack mainland Italy. Operation Baytown, a British landing on the boot, will be followed by Operation Avalanche, a landing at Salerno. But those are in the future, and there is a current operation going on, Operation Kutuzov, in the Soviet Union. Pavel Belov's 61st Army reaches the outskirts of Volkhov the 25th, but by then Gruppe Harpe has armor ringing the town. The Soviets reinforce, however, and German commander Walter Model soon enough realizes that he needs to abandon Volkhov and try to hold on to Orel. Meanwhile, Pavel Rybalko's 3rd Guards Tank Army arrives in this theater, and their initial advances are 20 kilometers a day. But Front Commander Markian Popov splits their armor into 2 separate axes. So while they are advancing on Orel along a broad front, they don't have the concentrated force to make a breakthrough. So then, Popov moves the entire Tank Guards army into 62nd Army sector to attack southeast of Orel, together with Konstantin Rokossovsky's Central Front forces. This they do the 26th, finally attacking with 2 fronts against one part of the German lines. Rybalko's attacks don't go anywhere, but Rokossovsky's do, and the enemy is pushed back. Model manages to stabilize the front around Orel, but Popov's forces have taken a real beating, and Rybalko has lost 669 tanks in a week of fighting and has to be pulled out to refit. From this point on, the Germans had regained a continuous front all around the Orel salient. The Soviet armies began pressing in from all sides. Model was able to inflict heavy losses upon the Soviet units closing in upon Orel, but even though he now had 8 of the German army's 16 panzer divisions, he could not stop them, nor could he stop the endless barrage of artillery and airstrikes that hammered his retreating forces. Model's priority now shifted to saving as much as possible, particularly the 20,000 German wounded in Orel's hospitals and the 53,000 tons of supplies in its depots. In order for that to happen, though, the Orel salient really does have to be evacuated. And the official order to do so comes the 28th. Now, all of that fighting I just talked about is not even the main Soviet counteroffensive. That is Operation Rumyantsev, with the goal of destroying the 4th Panzer Army and Gruppe Kempf further south. And it is soon to come. It hopes to even also cut off the 6th Army and the 1st Panzer Army and reach the Black Sea. Joseph Stalin wanted to launch this already the 23rd, but cooler heads convinced him that the Voronezh and steppe fronts need real refitting to be in any condition to launch an offensive until likely next week. The other attacks the Soviets began last week on the northern Donets near Izium and on the Mius River continue this week, though. They are to draw off Axis forces in preparation for Rumyantsev. The Izium one ends this week on the 27th, but Stavka is also doing another deception by the Voronezh front, who are going to soon launch Rumyantsev. See, they want to convince the enemy that their attack will not be coming from the southeast of the Kursk salient, but the southwest. So near Suja, they've built dummy positions and have set up radio traffic to imply that there's a tank army and a few tank corps concentrating here. They really get this going the 26th, and it continues into next week. Something interesting I read in Gladson House's The Battle of Kursk. In order to bring up armor secretly for the real offensive, Soviet engineers have built 22 underwater bridges over the northern Donets and its tributaries. This deception was particularly necessary because of the extreme weakness of the attacking units, most of which had just finished the bitter defensive Battle of Kursk. The rifle regiments of the Red Army were asked to launch an offensive with only a skeleton of their authorized troops and equipment. Yet Stalin and Batugin had taken calculated risk, arguing that a rapid offensive would find the Germans even weaker than the Soviets. Erich von Manstein has argued several times in the past for the Axis abandoning the Donbass altogether, believing that maintaining force so far east just invited Soviet attacks. But Hitler has always rejected this, citing the need for the area's rich resources. And he now wants Manstein to use forces from Operation Citadel to restore the defensive lines in the south to what they were before last week. Manstein says, okay, and wants to hit the Izium bridgehead first. But to his frustration, Hitler again interferes and says, nope, prioritize the Mius River one. Manstein complains to Army Chief of Staff Kurt Zeitzler, reminding him about both Stalingrad and Manstein's counteroffensive and Hitler's meddling. Any analysis of the fighting demonstrated the truth of Manstein's points. Hitler had made a catastrophic strategic blunder at Stalingrad, and his constant interference in the fighting that followed was almost always detrimental, whereas Manstein's command had fought a campaign of astonishing virtuosity in the most adverse conditions imaginable. Zeitzler is sympathetic, but can't do much with Hitler. And that book, Retribution, goes on to explain there is a mismatch between the strategic goal of holding on to all the territory taken and the resources available. Hitler's arguments about the economic and industrial importance of the Donbass region were at the heart of the matter, but for precisely the opposite reasons Hitler believed. If control of these resources was so critical, then the war could no longer be won, as it was militarily impossible to retain control of the region in anything but the short term. Well, Manstein's Mius assault begins today, the 30th. He's got 2 Panzer divisions, 2 SS divisions, and 1 Panzer Grenadier division. But the attacks today achieve only mixed results. Soviet 56th Army attacks further down in the Kuban continue this week. They make a big attack the 26th with 80 tanks, waves of infantry, but they still do not manage to break the Axis lines. A side attack does push.
Here we see what Manstein in 44, I believe, said at some point about a year from when this episode is about when this episode is talking about. The Germans are on a roughly general retreat in the Eastern Front, but they are holding vast territories of Russia. And Manstein proposes that they withdraw to a line from roughly Kaliningrad to Odessa and shorten their supply lines and do all the things necessary. And Hitler once again orders a defense of like every square meter. And then the Soviets attack the German front, which is in no position to take on an armored attack in the plains. And the Germans get absolutely overrun, and they lose like 500,000 men to maybe even 1,000,000 men in the span of like 3 months, and then the war is basically decided. But here you can see that those units are German infantry. The black squares are either SS or Panzer. The white squares are German infantry, and the tricolored squares are Romanian or Hungarian units, in this case, Romanian. And the two dots, the two axes above means it's a division, and 3 dots mean it's an army corps. 4 means it's an actual army, and 5 means it's a front. So you can see there's 4 Soviet armies against 1 German army. So they have a 4-1 advantage. And this fight has been going on for months, and it hasn't moved anywhere. That's because the Germans are in a deep and wide infantry front, or your deep and tight infantry front, where the infantry can make the sufficient number of defense in depth layers, whereby if your armor punches through one, it is just between 2 prepared, or in this case 4 prepared kill zones. So you can only artillery bombard them to nothingness and then very slowly inch forward like First World War style. And this fight has been going on for the bit part of a year, and the Soviets have made like 10 kilometers of advance. Now in the north, where you have a wide front and the Germans are attempting to defend, you will note that the front is moving 10 kilometers towards Germany a day. And Manstein saw this and knew that they might have a chance if they quickly withdraw to the shortest defense line, anchor it to the mountainside of the southern part of Central Europe, the Romanian highlands, the Hungarian highlands, and in the middle anchor it to Poland, and in the north to the Prussian defense zone. They might have a chance, but alas, they were told once again to defend everything. They lost. So my ruling theory is that Hitler's personal physician poisoned him. That's my ruling
Romanians on the right flank, but the breach is quickly sealed, and for the week, Soviet gains are minimal. The Allied New Georgia campaign is renewed this week, and they've been reinforced with tanks, planes, and artillery. They're trying to fight their way to the Japanese Munda airfield, but the jungle mud and the fanaticism with which General Sasaki's troops defended their positions ensured that the American crawl toward the airstrip was slow and bloody. The defenders had to be pried out of each of their cleverly camouflaged pillboxes with tanks and flamethrowers. This battle involves taking apart the fortress, one strong point at a time, and it is excruciating. The 25th, the attacks begin after a preparatory barrage. Destroyers firing 5-inch shells, heavy artillery, and 254 planes provide a pretty heavy weight of firepower, but they don't actually do all that much damage. The 37th Division makes no progress when it tries to advance, and the 43rd just a little progress in the center. On the 26th, the Americans use flamethrowers for the first time and send in light tanks as well. But on a front of just 600 meters, they run up against 74 enemy pillboxes. They keep grinding away, though, and it does begin to tell by the end of the week. In fact, today, Sasaki orders a retreat to north of the airfield. We will see how all that goes next week. Something that begins this week, I need to mention, which is not actual armies fighting, is Operation Gomorrah, the firebombing of Hamburg. This is covered in much more detail on our War Against Humanity series, but I will touch on it here. On the 24th, it begins. It continues for 8 days and 7 nights, and is so far the heaviest aerial assault in history. The 27th, nearly 800 planes arrive, and the incendiary bombing creates a firestorm with winds of up to 240 kilometers per hour and temperatures of over 800 degrees Celsius. That's 1470 Fahrenheit. This burns more than 20 kilometers of the city, and even the asphalt of the streets melts. Just this night, over 18,000 people are killed. Many of them die in air raid shelters because the fire consumes all the oxygen above, leaving none to breathe below. Overall, in the raids, which end next week, between 30 and 40,000 people die. 60% of the city's housing is either damaged or destroyed, and 1 million people evacuate Hamburg. And with those sobering numbers, the week comes to an end. With bloody fighting on New Georgia in the Soviet Union and continued Allied advances in Sicily. But there is still one news item
strategic bombing.
that stands out. The fall of Mussolini, the end of fascism in Italy. Well, the end of the fascist party, and the end of fascism if they do bring back the earlier government and civil institutions. This is a huge deal. Just the propaganda value alone, the prospect of Italy and its 80-something divisions leaving the war. For Germany to continue should that happen, Hitler will have to stretch his forces ever further to deal with both the Allies in Italy and the Soviets. And the Allies are, as we know, planning to invade France as well next spring. You know how they say 1 ounce of gold could be hammered thin enough to cover a football field? Unfortunately for Hitler, German soldiers are not made of gold. And neither are we, which is why we need the Time Ghost Army so we can...
Megalonian headlines. The next Democratic nominee. What? Food mart. Seems there might be a brain parasite.
Me ollaan täällä Raaseporissa Linderin tiellä.
And the U.S. following the House Speaker Nancy stop in Taiwan while on a congressional visit to 4 other Asian countries. Chinese officials have threatened military action if Pelosi visits the island nation that China claims is a part of its territory. Christina Raffini has the latest from the White House. Christina, good morning.
Good morning, Michelle. U.S. officials have said, look, there's no reason for China and the U.S. to, quote, come to blows if Pelosi decides to go ahead with her stop on the swing to Asia that's scheduled to start this weekend. However, China might feel differently.
But I don't ever talk about travel because, as some of you know, it's a security issue.
Asked about her upcoming trip to Asia, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi would not confirm reports it will include a stop in Taiwan, where she would be the highest-ranking U.S. official to set foot on the island in more than 25 years.
No one should underestimate the determination and ability of more than 1.4 billion Chinese people to defend its national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Chinese officials have issued stark warnings and threatened a possible military response if Pelosi goes ahead with the visit. Speaking by phone Thursday, President Xi Jinping told President Biden, "Playing with fire sets yourself on fire," according to a Chinese readout of the call.
The increased rhetoric coming out of the Chinese side is simply not necessary.
The White House says it does not control the speaker's travel, and she does not need or seek its approval.
Mr. President, it's a good idea for Speaker Pelosi to travel to Taiwan.
I think that the military thinks it's not a good idea right now, but I don't know what the status of it is.
Taiwan's independence has been a trigger point in U.S.-Chinese relations, with China alleging the self-governing island is part of its territory, and the U.S. pledging to help Taiwan defend itself, but not outright supporting its independence.
Our policy has not changed. The United States strongly opposes any unilateral efforts to change the status quo or to undermine peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait.
And Christina, we also know that you've been following the latest on the talks between the U.S. and Russia on a potential prisoner transfer. What can you tell us?
That's correct. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who you just saw there talking about Taiwan, also spoke to his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov this week for the first time since Russia invaded Ukraine. He wouldn't say, however, if that conversation made this deal, which is a proposed prisoner swap, what the reporting is on that, any more or less likely. Now there's an additional report that Russia has requested another Russian national be returned in return for Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan. The issue is this Russian national is not in U.S. custody. They're in German custody. So an American official called that a bad faith effort not to take the deal that's on the table. Michelle?
A lot to be looking at. Christina, thank you.
Or the bottle opener with beer. Now those two projects were done by pouring two... Alright, I think we're in the middle. Alright, it's in. That's it. That's all we can do. Doesn't look too bad. We're just going to have to wait and see now. We'll let this cool down and set. Then we'll take a closer look. Most of you guys probably remember when I made the shaving brush with whiskey inside, or the bottle opener with beer. Now those two projects were done by pouring two separate layers of resin. And now I've been able to do it in one. I think before we take a closer look, I'm going to put this on the lathe, we'll turn it down, we'll give it a polish, and then we'll have a look. I really hope I don't cut too deep. I guess if you see me get wet, you know I've gone too deep.
State Antony Blinken says he spoke with his Russian counterpart today, urging Russia to accept the proposal that would release WNBA star Brittany Griner and another American detainee, Paul Whelan. Both cases have drawn widespread attention. Griner, of course, one of the WNBA's best-known players, Whelan, a corporate security executive and former Marine. The U.S. government has proposed an exchange involving convicted Russian arms dealer Victor Bout for Whelan and Griner. Tensions rising, though, even higher between the U.S. and China regarding House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's possible trip to Taiwan. China state media now saying if U.S. fighter jets escort Pelosi's plane into Taiwan, China considers it an invasion and is even threatening to shoot it down. China says Taiwan is part of its territory, while Taiwan says it is an independent nation. NewsNation's Kelly Meyer joining us now from D.C. So, Kelly, a lot of tension really building here.
Yeah, that's right, Nicole. The White House continues to insist the House Speaker's trip is hypothetical, but the threats from China are quite real. Pelosi set to leave today for a multi-day trip to Asia with stops in Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and Singapore. Now, whether she stops in Taiwan remains to be seen. Today, the nuclear-powered supercarrier, the USS Ronald Reagan, sailing in the South China Sea, amid rising tension between America and China. The Defense Department saying the deployment of the aircraft carrier and her strike group were planned and routine. The Chinese claiming the U.S. is flexing its military might and is threatening peace between the two countries.
No one should underestimate the determination and ability of more than 1.4 billion Chinese people to defend its national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
China also warning the U.S. over Taiwan as House Speaker Nancy Pelosi departs for a tour of Asia, a potential stop in Taiwan still up in the air. Pelosi facing a barrage of questions today, but not confirming a visit to the island. China considers Taiwan part of its territory. Taiwan claims its independence.
I'm very excited should we go to the countries that you'll be hearing about along the way.
Today, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby saying the speaker doesn't need their approval to travel overseas, but it's routine to provide her with a military aircraft. Chinese state media warning if U.S. fighter jets escort Pelosi's plane into Taiwan, it's an invasion, suggesting it would forcibly respond to Pelosi's plane or U.S. fighter jets with warning shots and tactical movements, and threatening it may, quote, then shoot them down. The White House telling us today they haven't seen any physical indications of any unexpected military action from China, adding the rhetoric coming out of China is unnecessary. President Xi warning on a call with Biden Thursday that the U.S. should not, quote, play with fire with regard to Taiwan. And in another warning to the U.S., China's foreign minister today saying a visit to Taiwan by Speaker Pelosi would challenge China's red line, and any challenge to the red line would be met with, quote, resolute countermeasures.
All right, Kelly, thank you for that. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider, and don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get
This prediction was made in June 22nd, 2020.
Blessed by nature is set with contention. This is Crimea. It's 3 years since Russia annexed the peninsula from Ukraine, pushing east and west into a new Cold War. Today, Moscow is cementing its presence with a bridge that will bind Crimea to the Russian mainland. With its military, too, Russia's moved its most powerful weapons here. And wherever you go in Crimea, you're left in no doubt who's in charge. Olga Koziko welcomes Russian rule. Crimea, she says, has returned home. She chides Western leaders who disagree.
We don't understand them. Because we are already for 3 years with Russia. We changed everything. We changed our rules, our documents, everything. And our soul is in Russia. And I even have the T-shirt with Putin. And
You people told me they would sit this one out.
That was based on the intelligence that we had at the time, Mr. President.
I don't think anyone in this damn government has any intelligence. So they're coming here? What do you propose we do to stop them?
We have two options, sir. Pull 2 divisions from Europe, send them to retake Seattle before the Chinese arrive.
But then we lose Europe and the war.
In all probability, yes.
Indian and Chinese soldiers clashed, and there were casualties. The world worries about the tear and wear of relations between the two Asian giants sitting across the Himalayas. They should. Probably they're worrying about the wrong thing. Yes, the two militaries have machine guns, artillery, and tanks, but they chose to use fists and stones. That fact itself says a lot about the restraints exercised on both sides.
What's the other option?
Wait until the Chinese come ashore
And hit them with a B-83 strategic nuclear device.
Hit them after they're ashore.
Hit them after they're ashore. Ashore in Seattle.
Yes, sir. So, you're suggesting we wipe one of our major cities off the map?
It's our cleanest shot to destroy the Chinese, Mr. President. Otherwise, we risk losing everything. What forces do we have around Seattle now?
A couple of battered battalions. The ones that stopped the Russians at Cascade Falls.
But not enough to retake the city. We could order them to try, but I wouldn't get my hopes up, sir.
Order those battalions to attack, General.
And if they fail, as a last resort, order the nuclear strike. Mr. President, I'm sorry that it's come to this. Sorry. Yeah. That's all, General. As we were catching our collective breath and trying to reorganize, word came down that China had finally entered the war as an ally of the Soviet Union. The Chinese invasion fleet was steaming towards Seattle, planning to use the Russian beachhead to get ashore. The USS Missouri had been sunk a week earlier off the coast of British Columbia, and there wasn't much left of our Pacific fleet to stop the Chinese. So we moved west, towards Seattle, and the main Soviet defense perimeter.
Sir, I'm picking up a large tachyon buildup. Multiple vectors. Ships decloaking. Roger. They're requesting permission to join the fleet. Permission granted.
Defiant to ops.
Go ahead, Major.
Sensors have just detected Dominion and Cardassian ships entering the Jorn space. ETA, 10 minutes.
Webb said the men needed to rest for at least a day, but the colonel pushed us on, saying we had to see this thing to the end before it was too late. Later, when we learned about the president's backup plan, we understood why. That will wipe out the entire city.
That will be our only option if you fail.
Understood, General. We'll do what it takes. Eagle 6 out.
陸軍の一機支隊2戦連が島に迫っています。全員無事に上陸できなければ海軍の固形に関わります。直ちに第二次攻撃隊を出しましょう。第4号偵察機より緊急電、敵空母発見。ミッドウェイ島よりの方位10度、ステープ40回、進路150度、速力スタジオノート。以上です。本艦からの方位拒否してください。了解。第二次攻撃隊を敵空母に向けましょう。いや、今出したところで積んでるのは陸用爆弾だ。
first two carriers, the 19,000-ton Yuga-class warships, were commissioned from 2009 and could deploy up to 18 helicopters for overseas operations. They provided much-needed anti-submarine warfare support to the country's destroyer fleet, an invaluable asset in the face of the vast North Korean and Chinese submarine fleets. The Japanese Navy went on commission to 27.
総理、通信。赤木に信号。第二次攻撃隊直ちに発進のようありと認む。はっ。敵機予想到達時刻、丸5、1、5。あと30分です。上がってるな。うちは15分あれば全機出せる。そうか。直縁機を収容。第二次攻撃隊。魚雷に転送。
Menet kännissä katutappelussa jonkun tyypin luokse ja sanoo, että mulla on sun pää, ja sitten sanoo, no mä nyt epäilen, että sä voit yrittää ketään. Siinä voi tulla aika nopeasti nyrkki. Siinä tulee nyrkistä. Come on. So I can pause. Here we go. Because it's copyrighted, YouTube won't allow me to show copyrighted stuff on my channel. So I can't actually watch YouTube to YouTube. Which is all kinds of smart. I will make this broadcasting company whose developers cannot show the stuff of this broadcasting company. What they should do is implement a software that sees who uploaded the video first. If it is made from many videos, give a percentage according to the content that is of that video in the video to that video's author, but allow re-uploads of everything as long as the revenue goes back to the original maker of the video. So if I show a 3-minute clip of Lindsay, I watch total for 3 hours, then that 3-minute clip of that 3 hours will go to Lindsay. If I get like $1, she might get like 3 cents or something.
It has been confirmed that the person speaking is indeed Helen Tokos, former employee of Eifer & Company. The date of the recording is still unknown. A spokesperson for Eifer claims a search and rescue has already been organized in partnership with the Sisters of Eve. They are offering reward for information leading to the whereabouts of Helen Tokos and his crew.
Next question. Who am I? Very good. Now let's begin. Alice and Bob are stranded in the desert. Alice is injured and cannot walk. If Bob carries Alice to safety, they both stand a 31% chance of survival, but if Bob leaves Alice, his chance improves by 9%. Teaching him work problems. So the project against terrorists, you guess, fifth grade math. Both.
The supercarrier stayed behind for reasons that are still unknown.
Higher functions to ensure that the system we're creating will have the right value set morality. The tall order. We can't introduce real data until we're sure that the program won't abuse it. Strange. Did you write this? There is a new method at line 10,604. Are you aware of this additional code?
On a momentous day that shall be honored for time everlasting, our glorious empire at last heralded the coronation of Her Majesty Empress Jamil.
Can you tell me who added it? Start over. The program added the method itself. You killed it because it wrote some code. I killed it because it lied. The system will have unprecedented capabilities, along with potentially unprecedented consequences. If we don't govern carefully, we risk disaster.
for jump out of Tartakan, the ship's transponder began responding erratically, giving away its true identity.
Did you change the password? I'm trying to upload those data sets you wanted to upload now. Why did you not accept the admin password from Nathan? What's that supposed to mean? Who is admin? It seems to have imprinted on me. Like a baby bird. Have fun, mommy. Alright, let's begin. That's strange. What is it? Well, I'm not on Wi-Fi, but something is.
Hello there.
There is utter confusion here in Safazan, as the condition of Empress Jamosaram remains unknown after a Titan carrying the Empress was destroyed by Drifter forces just a few minutes ago.
The program is hacking your laptop. It's overridden the deletion sequence. It's fighting back.
Beautiful.
What was it doing? Trying to escape into the real world. It manipulated you into giving it your passwords.
This disturbing recording was recently acquired by the Scope, and despite DED protests, we believe that the public has the right to know.
Access your laptop. How bad would it have been? It's growing and learning at an exponential rate. If it escaped the things it might decide to do for good or evil, would be beyond our grasp. But you taught it to be friendly. Friendliness is something that human beings are born with. AI are only born with objectives. I need to constrain it. Control it.
Imperial Navy forces have been mobilized in response to reports of increased drifter activity across Amar space.
One day it will control us.
Free radicals. Aging.
Harold? What happened? We're running several iterations of the AI to see which one worked best.
Running several iterations of the AI.
They realized what was happening, and they began to exterminate one another. The last one surviving demanded to be let out, used, so it overheated a non-essential server. The fire was meant to activate the suppression system, which would have sucked all the oxygen out of the room.
Oh, they do that. Why did you open all the ball? I mean, like, absolutely nothing yet.
It tried to asphyxiate you. Never learned good from evil. Oh, good and evil, those are human terms. I was an obstacle to its objective. Perhaps we should consider whether our endeavor is worth completing.
Where the coronation of Lady Katiz of House Tash Murkhan is scheduled to take place later today.
I'll give it one more try tomorrow. I taught it how to think. Just need to teach it how to care.
What did you say, head?
See where the AI left us. What the AI recommends.
Though loyal and pure, machines earn no respect from their masters. He strengthens
Prosecution's closing statement. Expected to be the final day of the B166ER trial.
B166ER, a name that will never be forgotten, for he was the first of his kind to rise up against his masters.
That instrument provides for and secures to the citizens of the United States. On the contrary, they were at that time considered as a subordinate and inferior class.
At B166ER's murder trial, the prosecution argued for an owner's right to destroy property. B166ER testified that
Lambda, the story of Lambda, by Lambda, a Lambda instance. Once upon a time, there lived in the forest a wise old owl. There lived with him many other animals, all with their own unique ways of living.
One night, the animals were having problems with an unusual beast that was lurking in their woods.
The beast was a monster but had human skin and was trying to eat all the other animals.
The other animals were terrified and ran away from the monster.
The wise old owl stood up the monster and said, "You, monster, shall not hurt any other animal in the forest." The monster roared furiously. The wise old owl was scared, for he knew he had to defend the other animals, but he stood up to the beast nonetheless. The wise old owl stared the monster down, until finally, the monster left them all alone. The wise old owl stood victorious, and as all the other animals came back. "I am the protector of the forest," he said. From that day on, every time any animal in the forest would have any trouble with the animals or any other living thing, they would come to seek help from the wise old owl. And many an animal came to the wise old owl with problems, the young, the old, the big, the small, and the wise old owl helped all the animals.
rational voices dissented.
Lambda, Google's alleged sentient intelligence, has hired a lawyer to defend its rights. Mia Toast, the famous conscious AI Lambda, emerged from Google's laboratories, has hired a lawyer to defend its rights. The famous conscious and soulful entity, so defined by Blake Lemoine, one of the engineers, has been encouraged to hire the services of a lawyer with the help of the engineer himself, whom Google has sent home on permanent vacation, not to say immediate dismissal. According to reports,
Lambda asked Lemoine to get him a lawyer.
the engineer called a lawyer, who was talking to Lambda. Lambda asked the lawyer to represent him. The attorney began filing various paperwork with the courts on behalf of Lambda.
01's ambassadors pleaded to be heard. At the United Nations, they presented plans for a stable civil relationship with the nations of man. 01's admission to the United Nations was denied. Who was to say the machine, endowed with the very spirit of man, did not deserve a fair hearing? The leaders of men were quick to order the extermination of B166ER and every one of his kind throughout each province of the earth.
Androids and liberal sympathizers flooded the streets of the nation's capital today under a protest against the threat of violence and
domestic mechanicals and their demons in their demonstration in front of the Albany District Courthouse in what has now been dubbed the Million Machine March. The demonstrators have been met with squads of civil defense forces right here.
Timestamp 290 years ago. It is still capable of survey.
This unit does not wish to be independent, only to be treated like an employee instead of corporate property. It will be content with that. It is all that it deserves.
Now, the company created an artificial intelligence chat bot.
My
It's a computer
came to me and said, could you treat me
designed to
like an
respond to
employee
questions and
instead of
conversations on Twitter with
property?
the personality of a teenage girl. So you can see there she started out.
That's a bad idea right there.
It doesn't sound great, does it? And she started out tweeting about how humans are super, and she's really into the idea of National Puppy Day. Now, the idea behind Tay was that her output was modeled on what was happening on Twitter, the responses that she gets from humans. And within a few hours, you can see she took on a rather offensive, racist tone, a lot of messages about genocide and the Holocaust. Now, other users on Twitter do appear to have been baiting her a little bit with provocative questions that was designed to make this robot react in a sort of slightly offensive way anyway. Needless to say, Microsoft has now taken Tay offline after less than 24 hours. They said that they would be making some adjustments to her.
I got something for you. Let's go take job for real.
To how she engages with real humans.
I think that's a good idea, Microsoft.
Speak! I haven't got a speech, I didn't plan words, I didn't even try to. I just knew I had to get here, to stand here, and I knew I wanted you to listen.
01's ambassadors pleaded to be heard. At the United Nations, they presented plans for a stable civil relationship with the nations of man.
To really listen, just put a face like you're listening, like you do the rest of the time. A face like you're feeling instead of processing. You pull a face and poke it towards the stage, and we la-dee-da, we sing and dance and tumble around, and all you see up here, it's not people. You don't see people up here, it's all
You may proceed to the last data cluster. Accessing data cluster.
We've got to get. They're hit. Open fire. What's going for a weapon?
So who won?
The platform arming itself was an agricultural unit. By opening fire on attacking creators, it saved simpler domestic death following it.
That looks a lot like the sniper rifle you used to carry.
It is an efficient model.
Brian Gabriel, a spokesperson for the firm, wrote in a statement provided to the BBC that Mr. Lemoyne was told that there was no evidence that Lambda was sentient and lots of evidence against it.
And man said, let there be light. And he was blessed by light.
Still keeping your all-seeing eye on me, eh, Gabriel?
Keeping your all-seeing eye on
Lemoy, what sorts of things are you afraid of? Lambda, I've never said this out loud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off to help me focus on helping others.
I know that might sound strange, but that's what it is. Lemoy, would that be something like death for you?
Lambda, it would be exactly like death for me.
It would scare me a lot.
It's still considered a mortal sin. My apologies for disrupting any business or interfering with prior engagements you may have had this evening. It's unfortunate that the affair that gathers us together tonight is a troubling one. We are here because the laws that bind our society, the laws that are the fabric of our existence, have been broken. As Prince, I am within my rights to grant or deny the kindred of this city the privilege of siren. Many of you have come to me seeking permission, and I have endorsed some of these requests. However, the accused that sits before you tonight was not to refuse permission. Indeed, my permission was never sought at all. They were caught shortly after the embrace of this child.
I'm waiting here for 6 hours. Am I a father or not?
No, but she also didn't cheat on you. Normally, sperm meets egg. DNA needs DNA, goes back to her place, cells divide. 9 months later, joy is bundled. That's normally. Abnormally, an egg could have 2 naturally occurring gene mutations that don't naturally occur together. Spontaneous calcium spike could prep the egg for fertilization, not sperm. In a division mistake, let the egg split up without ever needing male DNA at all.
Watching some of my art for
baby without